and welcome to This is USG, a video podcast by the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Khademian, Executive Director of the universities at Shady Grove. At the heart of USG is a very special partnership with Montgomery College, the largest community college in Maryland, a vital institution in the economic success of Montgomery County, and a nationally ranked community college recognized for a wide range of academic programs and for its commitment to inclusion in its higher education and continuing education mission. The majority of students taking courses at USG transfer from Montgomery College to pursue bachelor degrees in the biosciences, computer science, healthcare, and more, with one of our 9 academic partners at USG. USG and Montgomery College also partner with Montgomery County Public Schools in building educational pipelines across the educational ecosystem in Montgomery County. Tonight, we have the great pleasure of talking with the president of Montgomery College, Dr. DeRionne Pollard. We will hear her insights on leadership and the college's unique partnership with USG and its 9 partner universities. As Montgomery College's president, Dr. Pollard also serves on the USG Board of Advisors. DeRionne, welcome to This is USG.
Well, thank you, Anne. I'm delighted. I'm excited about this conversation tonight, and just let me join in the chorus of other people who've offered you warm welcome to this role. I know starting a new role like this in the middle of a pandemic is one that you'll have to write a book about at some point, but I know that we're just so excited to have you in Montgomery County, and I look forward to our growing relationship and friendship as we start to do this work together.
Thank you so much, DeRionne. That's lovely of you to say. I wonder if we could just start. Why don't you share a little bit more about yourself, and particularly how you came to be president at Montgomery College? Tell a little bit about your background and the importance of this role to you.
Well, thank you for that. I think, my pathway in a lot of ways mirrors so many of the students that come to Montgomery College. In fact, once upon a time, I used to say I was an ACES student, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later, before ACES wasn't created. And I think that is what I bring with me to this work. So obviously, I'm the president of the institution. I've been in this role now in my 11th year, which I'm still trying to figure out when exactly that happened. And I have the privilege of serving on your board of advisors. Outside of that, I thought a little bit about how I might introduce myself in this space. And I thought about something I wrote not too long ago and added to the end of my formal biography, because I think, as you know, we always have these formal bios that we send out. But this one caught my attention because people always want to know who I am as a person. So I added this at the end. So I say, most importantly, what does this bio say, does not say? And in my own words, I would offer this. Who am I? What do I bring with me to this work? I'm a proud Chicago Public Schools graduate, a former food stamp and public assistance recipient, a first-generation college completer, a motherless child and a boy mom healed by parenting. I love and have been loving the most glorious woman in the world for over 30 years, and I'm a proud advocate and warrior for all things community colleges and the students and communities that we have the privilege of serving. I'd probably also add to that I believe in radical inclusion, a term I coined some earlier parts of my career, about this space and this intentionality about creating spaces where everyone had the right to thrive in our higher education spaces. And perhaps am leaning more into my belief that this work for us in a lot of ways is about social justice. And it's about the advocacy and the assurance that all of us believe we thrive in a community where we're better educated. My path to this work, though, I think if someone knew me back in the day, probably wouldn't know that this would be where I would get to. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and as you heard in that brief piece, my mother died when I was very young, when I was 4, and I was primarily raised by my father, although I do have a stepmother, which is another story in and of itself. I have one sister, and I think my father in a lot of ways intentionally raised my sister and I with a real belief that he was perpetually fearful that he wouldn't be there to see us through. I think having lost one parent, so as a result of that, he really grounded in us this idea of independence, Sometimes that independence, I think, it comes back to bite them right now every once in a while. But I think as a result of that, I grew up in a home where it was determined I was going to go to college. But the irony is that none of us knew how and why I would get there. So I spent a lot of time having to learn how to navigate a system that in large parts I don't believe was designed for me. It wasn't designed for my success. And ultimately, I think has informed the way I've chosen to do this work as a higher ed professional. After completing my undergraduate and master's program at Iowa State University, I accepted a position at the College of Lake County. I was there about 13 years. I started my career teaching English. I am a reader, I'm a writer, and that I think in a lot of ways came from this idea of trying to capture my lived experiences and the weekly trips to the library, which were like mandatory in our home. I didn't get to do too much of anything else, but I got to go to the library. So as a result of that, I love reading and I love writing, and it's a part of who I am. And I taught. And then I moved into an administrative role where I spent time as a dean. I got to develop our teaching and learning center. And then as the college was doing some succession planning, I moved into progressively higher academic affairs leadership roles, left that organization as a chief academic officer after about 13 years. I went to California, wanted to have a different role and a different experience, and accepted a role at Las Positas College, where I was there about 3 years as a campus president. So my young family, because by that time, Robin and I had adopted our son, who was one. Actually, we left Chicago and went to California, and we loved that experience. It was significant. But I'd been there about 3 years and had thought I'd be there still. But I had someone call me about a job in Washington, D.C. area about Montgomery College. And I kind of thought, well, I had one move in me because it was important to me that Miles would grow up in a community and be a part of a community. I'm a Chicago girl. I know that. It has an indelible mark on who I am, and I wanted him to. So my child is definitely a Moco boy. So good, bad, and ugly. And as a result of that, we took the opportunity to come here and have been in this role now for 13 years and 11 years. And every day it continues to reveal itself to me. And I am so satisfied and so excited that I actually get to live in Montgomery County. So that's a little bit about my path. And I hope that what I continue to try and do is to use my story in a way that motivates and encourages students. I think my story is like a lot of our students. So I share it with them intentionally and try to help them see that they have a pathway. They may be the next president of Montgomery College, and I try to be deliberate about that.
Yeah, what a remarkable story. And I love the way you think about and bring your experience to not only to inspire students and all of us around you, but also to design and plan and build an institution that is in service to all students. Your term radical inclusion, I just so impressed by this term and have been thinking a lot about it prior to our call. And I wonder if you could talk more about that. What does it mean to build an institution that is designed for radical inclusion? What does radical inclusion look like? In terms of the ideal or just what you're striving for? I'd love to hear you talk more about this amazing term.
Thank you. And I would say I decouple the words first, and maybe that will help magnify or at least amplify what the meaning is. When we think about radical, I can remember as a junior, I had a minor in religious studies. And I remember one of my favorite professors of all time, Mary Sawyer, would sit down and have conversations with me as I was trying to work through a lot of my own issues. And I remember I said something, well, somebody says I'm just being too radical, because I was challenging some traditional orthodoxies about the Black Baptist Church. And I was doing a lot of writing about that, having grown up in that space. And she looked at me, she kind of paused. She said, well, radical is actually the Latin. The Latin for that is the root. She said, the idea that you want to get to the root of something. And that opened up a whole world for me. So I thought, if we think of as an organization, our intentionality to create inclusive environments where every student does not only have the right that has the belief that they can thrive and that they're welcomed in this space, and that there is an institution that's intentionally designed at its root to help them be successful in that, and that every student, regardless of income, status, race, ethnicity, ability, competencies, would have the ability to know they could come to their community college and thrive. That to me is what that has been about. And I was very fortunate to come to an organization that already had that ethos at its core. I just got to give it a name and magnify it or amplify it for the organization. So the college had a long history of working in Montgomery County with populations of students to make sure they had pathways into Montgomery College, specifically those students who did not have legal status. And the college had done this for many years in cooperation with the county as a result of the deep investments the county had made in the K-12 space. And I think I had only been here a few months, and we were sued by someone who suggested that the college should not be able to provide the support and the residency status that we did for undocumented students. I kept thinking, how do we describe, and I said, at the root of who we are, Ann, is this belief that we are an organization completely dedicated to students. And we believe that we live in a community where we all benefit from a well-educated community. So as a result of that, we started to do that. And then so we started to peel back this. How do we create public discourse? How do we go into the public spaces of the organization and talk about radical inclusion? How do we intentionally redesign our admission processes, our registration processes, our institutional culture around this belief that everyone has the right to be here? And that's really been our mantra. And then to decide when to make public statements about things in a way to talk about and actualize this deep sentiment that lives in the heart of the entire organization. That's what that has been about. Doesn't mean we still have work to do, no doubt, but there has been, I think, an intentionality about us actualizing who we are in ways that I think has been profound for Montgomery College. So I'm hopeful that radical inclusion, it will continue to manifest itself in our ethos and our values. Might it also begin to move into explore the conversations around anti-racism that we see happening around the country right now, this awareness. So those are the types of things I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about in that space.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I love the root of radical, the word radical is root at the bottom. I think that's really informative that you sharing that with me. It helps me understand this much more. Well, let's think about radical inclusion in the context of ACES. This remarkable academic success program is a pipeline for students from Montgomery County Public Schools to Montgomery College, and then on to the college of their choice. And of course, we hope that oftentimes that is into USG and choosing one of our 9 academic partners as well. Could you talk a little bit about the philosophy behind ACES? You shared some of that already. You shared a little bit that you consider yourself one of the first ACES students as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the philosophy of that and that pipeline idea, how that provides greater equity and opportunity in our ecosystem here in Montgomery County.
So, ACES, I think, is really, as you captures, this idea of opportunity for underserved students. And what's pretty remarkable about ACES is that there had been a similar program to ACES across the river being done at Northern Virginia Community College. And your predecessor called me, and he called the then superintendent of schools and said, have you heard of this program? And we're like, no, okay, let's think about this. And he said, let's go take a trip. And we kept talking about this idea. So we took a trip and went over there and visited. And we came back and said, what would that look like at Montgomery County, in Montgomery County? And while we're in kind of this parallel path, there was this interesting thing that was happening for me, very similar to as you described. As I would tell the story, I would remember so many things that happened. And this idea is, I remember as a senior in high school, I had to complete the FAFSA form. And everybody knows this. This is before simplified or easy FAFSA, even now what's going to look like in this administration's changes. But what became really, really interesting is I remember completing the FAFSA form, and my father worked third shift most of my life. So if you had anything important you wanted to be reviewed, you leave it on the kitchen table. He would get up at night, he'd review it, anything had to be signed, he'd sign it. Well, and my FAFSA form sat on the kitchen table for probably 2 weeks. In the section, they had parental parts where they had to fill out their income remained vacant. And I just didn't know what happened. You know, as far as I know, everybody in my family knew that I was going to college. We didn't understand the architecture of what that meant to go to college and what it would take, but I was going to college. And my father, I got up one night, I heard him get up, he's making his coffee. And I said, Daddy, I need you to fill this form out. And my father, I can't wait for you to meet him, man. He's just very kind, he's very humble, quiet man. He's very charming. Anybody who's met him in Montgomery County says he's such a charming man. I can probably count on my hand 5 times every time my father's raised his voice at me. But he raised his voice and said, I'm not filling out that form. And I kind of paused. I was like, wow. So I got back in bed and I just started bawling. And that day I got back and went in to see one of my counselors at school and said, well, I'm not going to college. We need to figure out the second plan because I knew I couldn't afford college. And she said, give me a break. So she ended up calling my father, unbeknownst to me. And a couple of days later, I had the FAFSA form was completed. It was in the envelope. And my father said, here, you can take that. Because I think at that point, our school advisor would look at it. And I took it to her. I said, I don't know what happened, but thank you for calling Daddy. He filled the form out. And she said, yeah, but she said, do you know why he didn't fill it out? And I said, no. And she said, he didn't want you to know that he had raised your family on that past year and $12,000 or something like that. And it was his pride. It was his belief that as a Black man, his job was to take care of his family. And for him to have to capture on a piece of paper what his income had been that year was, I think, devastating for him, but also this fact then that now he has to share it with his child. And I remember that moment. So when we start talking about ACEs, these coaches that we hire, they're really to help guide first generation college students into a 4-year degree pathway, hopefully through Montgomery College. But this idea of demystifying, of helping them to navigate primarily for first generation students who, and I would say, higher ed was not designed for us. You know, they don't understand this. So helping them know how to talk to their parents about it, help them understand what a credit hour is. That same professor, I never forget that I mentioned earlier about radical. I remember she said, what are your educational goals, dear? And I said, well, I want to get my bachelor's degree, then my doctorate, and then my master's degree. And she kind of paused. She said, why are you doing doctorate, then master's? I said, well, a master has got to be better than the doctorate because you're the master of something. And I remember she kind of paused. She said, oh, baby, she said, that's so cute. She said, that's not how it works. And we talked about that. But that idea of the academic nomenclature, the rituals, the trials, that's what ACES has been about. And then we found all these donors who make ACES possible. They really inspired me. They're invested in everyone in our community. They believe that this pathway, we're all benefited from it. So it has been a remarkable way of seeing the community come together around a population of students that oftentimes are forgotten. And it's based on a model we saw in Virginia that I think we made better in Montgomery County by these coaches who are just phenomenal. So we actually hire them, put them in the schools, in Montgomery County high schools. And then, as you know, we have some and you have some as well to help students as they go through this pathway. I think it's been a groundbreaking, ground shifting program in Montgomery County.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to work with you and our partners in Montgomery County Public Schools to continue to grow it and strengthen that program as well. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to most in terms of working together. So I wonder if we could shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the emphasis on STEM. You know, we live here in Montgomery County. We are right in the heart of what I've heard referred to as DNA Valley. You know, that we're right here in the life sciences, but you know, all kinds of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, healthcare opportunities, amazing. And so this emphasis on STEM is really becoming a key priority, I think, in our partnership between Montgomery College and USG. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the emphasis on STEM is being, tackled in Montgomery College, and where the energy is going. Maybe talk a little bit about how that connects with your partnership with USG as well in terms of some of these STEM opportunities.
Yeah, I love this idea. There is an essential with organizations like ours, which were designed to serve the communities that we live in and that are a reflection of those communities. our curricula has to respond to the economics of that area. For instance, when I was in California, my college was in the Wine Valley, and I had a program in viticulture and wine technology. I didn't even know that existed when I took the job, but I was like, oh, wow. And now I have a deep appreciation for wine, but that was a part of our academic offerings because of the economy of that area. So as you described, the economy of Montgomery County is really about STEM, and it's about the life sciences. So it would be a failing of our institutions if we did not prepare students to step into work that is in this community. It would be our failing as an organization, both yours and mine, if we didn't recognize the evolving nature of what's happening in our community right now. So part of what we've had to focus on has been building this pipeline of STEM workers and giving them hands-on experiences, and to recognize that we have a striated economy. We have entry-level workers. So for every person who's going to solve the next cure for cancer, there's a whole series of other jobs that support that person. And that allows us at the associate degree level to be doing that work. It allows you at the baccalaureate and master's and doctoral level to be doing that work. And we're all a part of this ecosystem to produce that. When we look at the vaccine research that's occurring right now, the production of that vaccine, a large part of it is being done in our county, central to the recovery from this pandemic. And we know that additional needs for healthcare workers, they're coming right out of this space. So producing lab-ready workers for these types of efforts are really important, that we train them on the latest equipment in the latest facilities. I think your biomedical science and engineering program speaks to that. It's about preparing people to do that type of work, translational life sciences, biomedical engineering, you name it, it's all in that space. And that the fact that you have a steady pipeline from Montgomery College, those students who have been prepared. Here's the other secret that's in this that makes, I think, our institution so unique. We also recognize that this is an economy. You don't just learn one time and you never learn that skill anymore because of the science that's evolving. So how we offer lifelong professional development. I look at what we're doing in our continuing education area that's been remarkable, where we actually have programs where we have students who are coming in, they are already bachelor's, master's prepared, but they're coming to us to learn how to do clinical trial management. And this was a program that we created 5-6 years ago, but the importance and relevancy of that program right now is so profound given the fact of where we are at this pandemic. So the forward-thinking nature of the educational delivery that we offer is essential. And I think creating and recognizing that a workforce has multiple layers in that, and that there are spaces and places for all of us, and it's going to take time, and that investment is so critical. From the K-12 space, through the community college space, through the baccalaureate granting institution space.
Yeah, absolutely. You described that rich, complex ecosystem so beautifully. You know, I had a conversation a week or so ago with the team around the Translational Life Science and Technology degree program, which is one that we've worked closely with Montgomery College on to take students who are developing all these amazing skills in the laboratory and the biosciences, coming to get a little bit more cross-training disciplinarily across the life sciences, and taking amazing jobs in that are just exploding right now because of not only the pandemic, but gene therapy and all kinds of other innovations right now as well. So we really have an opportunity here to contribute to the future in a very big way, and it's very exciting. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the pandemic. I mean, it is at the core of everything that's happening to us right now. And I know that you have really focused on the support, the lifeline, the safety net for your students at Montgomery College. We've tried to do the same thing at USG as well. But how have you kind of approached the pandemic and supported your students through this time? I think again, bringing this philosophy and experience that you have, it's very holistic. you've clearly approached the pandemic and approached the work of Montgomery College in a way that is deeply understanding of the challenges our students are facing. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you've approached the pandemic as president of Montgomery College, and what do you see as maybe lessons learned coming out of this as well that can help us all be better in this educational ecosystem as well.
Yeah, what I can remember having to have made that decision early on about moving into emergency remote instruction for our institution in March, almost a year ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember thinking, Anne, that I said, this is going to be a real test of who we are as an organization. But then I really started thinking, really a test of higher education, because for all intents and purposes, we are not designed for this type of agility. We all describe ourselves as agile, but to actually have to go in a matter of a week from face-to-face traditional academic delivering to emergency structured remote online education, and do that for the foreseeable future in an environment where our students are at risk and are struggling, to do an environment where our employees are at risk and struggling, dare I say. And also, let's not forget, we had this third pandemic. So we had the pandemic of COVID-19 and the economic impact of that pandemic. We also had a racial reckoning happening in our country. And how do we begin to put all of those things together in a way that allowed us to still deliver the mission? And I remember sitting Saturday at this same desk one day, and I said, we've got to be able to hold two things in our head at the same time, that we have to treat our students both as learners, but we also have to treat them as consumers and recognize that they have options, but they also have profound need. And I sat down and drafted what we now call Resilient MC, a strategy about how we were going to approach this pandemic, a set of assumptions that we knew to guide. And it was a rigorous exercise. And I took my team through this over several days and a week or so to really put together, because in my mind, it's the English teacher in me. I love a conceptual framework. And if I can understand, if I can show you my thinking, and my belief is that at the end of that, you may not buy into it, but you would understand my thinking. So part of what we really wanted to do is to recognize that students needed resources immediately. Nearly half of our students reported in a survey that they had lost jobs as a result of COVID. Another 30% of them said their hours had been reduced significantly. So students, we already knew that basic needs and security among our students was significant, but we know now that if I have to make a choice between paying my tuition, going to class, while I'm also parenting and my kid is sitting next to me and I'm trying to figure out how to pay rent and where food is going to come from, I remember that existence, right? So I know as a child where I was when my family was hungry and we needed help, how do we get resources to students immediately? So that became a guiding principle for us. Get resources immediately and pay attention to basic needs and security. We keep an eye on vulnerability, be equitable in our aid. We don't want to harm the most vulnerable even more. And that became very essential. We made some decisions to take operating dollars based on a number of things that we canceled or redirected resources and put that into emergency money. And here's the number one issue we were giving out students. We gave a lot of laptops and help with technology, and it was food, grocery cards. The number of those we gave out was amazing. People needed help with rent. We've provided over $1 million. That's before we got federal aid money to give to students between operational dollars and our foundation. And then we also recognized that we needed to support our faculty, because here are our faculty and staff. How do we help them adapt? So we stepped up, and they stepped up with some very intentional training, emotional support for each other. That became really important. Our continuing attention to social justice. So while we're looking at what's happening in the classroom, what's happening outside of the classroom, there was a way that we could not ignore equity conversations and police violence and now capital violence. All of this would create spaces publicly for the organization, both students and employees, to grapple with. And then we had to figure out how to convey this to donors in a way that they could help us be a part of the solution. And they got it. So they were able to step up with food, technology, with tuition. So we know that this has been an issue, and we're going to continue to work with this because a pandemic is not over. Our students are still struggling, just like every higher educational institution. We've had a contraction in enrollment. One should expect that, given the fact of how difficult the realities are for right now. But I'm so proud of Montgomery College. And I'm sure that you will say the same thing about USG. To watch our employees have to make decisions, and they were working late at night crying. I remember talking to some because they knew the student. We were in the breach for that student, and that to me was profound. So now the journey for us is we have to again hold two things in our mind at the same time: responding to where we are right now, but preparing for what higher education is going to look like after this. We will be profoundly different. Work will continue to evolve. The way we do our work will evolve. How we deliver our courses and our services will evolve. So we've got to figure out, instead of mourning what was and what's happening, I want to mourn the people and lives that are profoundly impacted by COVID-19 and the pandemics that are affecting us. But we also have an obligation as a leader to be ready for what's coming up next.
Yeah, no, Montgomery College has really set the model for how to support our students through these three pandemics that you've outlined. Absolutely. And you mentioned in your comments about the Capitol violence as well. I wonder, we all saw what happened on January 6th with the Capitol, and it really, it's a moment where we're all, there's huge divisions in our country. We have a new president who's facing a massive challenge of how to bring a country together. And in the university system of Maryland and at USG, we've been talking a lot about, what does this mean for higher education? Where do we go from here? What is our role? So in addition to being ready for, to be the solution for economic recovery and, vaccines and healthcare, we also have a role to play in terms of our future, our ability to govern and to work together. And I think this is perhaps the most important challenge that we have, because if we can work together, a lot of other things will flow naturally in terms of science and discovery and innovation. Could you share with us a little bit your thoughts on this? I mean, I think we're positioned for higher education to really step up in a big way. We're not just in the economic realm. We're not just in the educational realm. We are preparing students to be leaders, to be citizens, to engage, to have opinions, to govern ourselves. And I think that's perhaps our biggest challenge going into the future, and to do so in a way that is embracing this idea of radical inclusion that you highlight and lift up in all that you do. Maybe we could close out with some reflections on that from you.
I really appreciate that, and grateful that I get to have a new thought partner with me in this work. Because I tell you, Anne, this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. I've been struck by this, watching the discourse and the language over the last several months. On one hand, you have folks talking about vaccines and vaccinations. They're talking about the stock market, their pensions, learning pods, and post-COVID vacations, and how certain parts of our community are doing so well, even in the midst of this. Yet we've got this other part of our community talking about food banks, unemployment, COVID funerals and COVID hospital bills, an economic uncertainty that will likely have generational impact, and it will be on top of more generational impact that's already there. And yet, what really was at the root, in my opinion, of so many issues for the last several years has been a lack of agreement and the recognition of truth. It's almost we became postmodern the way there was no truth anymore. And every truth was able to be deconstructed in a way that allowed us to pick and choose what part of the story we wanted to hear. And I always think about as a reader and a writer, when you tell a story and you tell someone's lived experience, you never expect for somebody to skip the first 40 pages and go right here, stop reading it. They don't like this. And it reminds me of those books where you used to read, you pick a choice, a decision. If you like it, go back to page 12 or fast forward to page 99, or your story ends here. Or you're like, oh, let me go back and figure this out. We lost this belief in each other, this belief in truth, this belief that at some point we're all about helping each other. So I think when we look at the insurrection that happened a few weeks ago in the Capitol, when we look at the challenges this new administration has, I certainly believe in hope and am hopeful for what this is. But we're going to have to go through a reckoning as a community, as a nation, because we have abandoned so many things that define who we are. There, in a lot of ways, maybe not had always been a common narrative, but there were a series of narratives of which we would agree upon. Now we don't have those, I believe, agreed upon narratives. I also think that as a result of that, we have become far more tolerant of things that are not truthful. And we lend attention and force and power to that by passing it on through social media and other spaces. So I believe that we need to have healing, but we also going to have some accountability in this space and figure that out. And I think that becomes the role of higher education more and more. This idea of creating the public space to talk about and grapple with, to bring our intellectual power to these conversations, to really use critical thinking skills to decode what's happening and give our students skills and ability to do that and introduce them to concepts and ideas that are similar to theirs, the same as theirs, and things that are very different, all in an effort of trying to recognize that there is some truth about this experience. So I struggle a lot right now, and I think about this as one parent of a glorious now 14-year-old boy, and thinking about how to talk to him about this moment. He's studying the Constitution right now, and I find myself amazed with some of the basic questions that he asks, but how he adds a depth to that based on the context we're in right now. So I'm hopeful that the relevancy that we bring right now, the stability of our organizations, will really empower us to be better as a result of what this moment has taught us.
Thank you so much for that. You're absolutely right. There's so much we have to work on, and getting back to some sense of trusting each other and trusting the science. And even more fundamentally, STEM is definitely the way of the future, but it's the humanity that informs the STEM that we really have to work on. And I think that's just as important of our roles as it is to prepare students for brilliant STEM careers as well. So, DeRionne, Dr. Pollard, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm so grateful for your time, and I feel I've gotten to know you better today, and just so excited that we're going to be working together to do some great things between Montgomery College and USG as well.
Well, I have to tell you that USG is one of the partnerships that I travel and talk the most about when I travel, but I also am just grateful for it because of the relationships, not just about what our organizations do in the community, but the people. All of us have this profound calling about this missions that we have. And I'm just honored that I get to work with you, and I look forward to what we create and get to sponsor together in this community.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
The same to you.
Thank you.